A complex sentence is simply a sentence that contains a main clause and one or more subordinate clauses. Remember that subordinate clauses begin with subordinating conjunctions, relative pronouns, or relative adverbs. Let's call these trigger words because their presence tips you off to a subordinate clause. Let's look at some examples. Lois signed her contract after she negotiated a raise. This one is fairly straightforward. Your main clause is Lois signed her contract. It has a subject, Lois, and a predicate, signed her contract. The subordinate clause is after she negotiated a raise. It begins with a subordinating conjunction, after, which automatically makes it dependent on the main clause. Jim Abbott, who had only one hand, pitched for years in the major leagues. Here the main clause is Jim Abbott pitched for years in the major leagues. That part could stand alone as a sentence, and it's the main idea of the sentence. The subordinate clause is who had only one hand. It could not stand alone. Well, how did I find it since it's buried in the sentence? I looked for the trigger word. In this case, it was a relative pronoun, who. When the players went on strike, the commissioner canceled the World Series. In this sentence, the subordinate clause is fairly obvious because it is set off by a comma, when the players went on strike. When the players went on strike also begins with a subordinating conjunction, a trigger word, in this case, the word when. If I move the clause to the end of the sentence, it would read, the commissioner canceled the World Series when the players went on strike. It would still be a complex sentence, and the main and subordinate clauses would not change. Whatever clause is preceded by a subordinating conjunction, a relative pronoun, or a relative adverb is automatically the dependent or subordinate clause. One more. Before she runs, Lolo Jones speaks to her coach who has guided her for years. Here we have a main clause. Lolo Jones speaks to her coach. And two subordinate clauses. The first one starts with a subordinating conjunction, before. So before she runs is a subordinate clause. The second one starts with a relative pronoun, who. So who has guided her for years is also a subordinate clause. Don't be fooled into thinking that a complex sentence can contain only one subordinate clause. Sentences can also be compound complex. That means that there is more than one main clause and at least one subordinate clause. Let's look at a couple of examples. When we went to State Fair, we saw the pig races, but we missed the horse show. Our two independent clauses are joined by the coordinating conjunction, but. And here they are. We saw the pig races, we missed the horse show. If the sentence consisted of only these two parts, we'd call it a compound sentence. But it becomes compound complex because we also have a subordinate clause. It's triggered by the word when. When we went to State Fair is my subordinate clause. If you know your conjunctions, the coordinating conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and your relative pronouns and relative adverbs, and it's a fairly short list, you should have no trouble figuring these out. The park closed and we left Mount Rushmore, although we would have liked to stay longer. Here we have the main clause, the park closed, joined to another main clause, we left Mount Rushmore, by the coordinating conjunction and. They are both followed by the subordinate clause, triggered by the subordinating conjunction, although. So, although we would have liked to stay longer is your subordinate clause. When you are writing, you need to think about your sentence structure. Too many simple sentences strung together can be monotonous. Use compound complex and compound complex structures to enhance your writing.